And, I commend Virginia has done a lot of things at the state level, but we need to pay more at every level, more than lip service to the notion of advanced manufacturing. That means workforce training. I don't know, Lieutenant Governor Bolin, but one of the biggest frustrations I had, I thought I was going to come in as governor and finally rationalize workforce training monies. I used to say we had, 32 programs and 8 different agencies and 4 different secretariats. I think we almost had still that many when I was done, because we've got to have us at the federal level bring those federal monies in a more rational way around the advanced training around manufacturing. And part of that as well means the manufacturing of the 21st century, for the most part, is not going to be the multi-thousand person firms that we saw in the 20th century, but it's going to be small specialized manufacturing facilities that are 20, 50, 100, 200, 300 personnel. And we again need, I think, to review our tax code on how we can incent both the training dollars and the investment dollars to get into manufacturing. Fourth, one thing specifically for Virginia, and I was in the Valley yesterday talking about this. One of the things in our location that we have in Mid-Atlantic region is we can do remarkable things growing our tourism opportunities. Over the last, again, 7 or 8 years, what's happened in Southwest Virginia, starting with the Crooked Road, and now the Heartland Project in terms of building our artisan network across Southwest Virginia, those are jobs that will never be exported. Yesterday we had a similar kind of brainstorming session around the Shenandoah Valley. Shenandoah Valley has probably got the best brand of any part of Virginia, yet we don't do near enough to exploit that in terms of combining history, arts, culture, outdoor recreation, and the whole wide stretch of tourism. And one of the challenges, and I say this respectfully, is from a tourism standpoint, not every tourism venue lies in the 95 and 64 corridor. And we need to recognize and think much more creatively about tourism as a job generator going forward. Tax policy, two or three more points, and then I will be happy to take questions. We need to get some predictability on tax policy. It is crazy right now, the game of chicken that is being played between the Republicans and the Democrats on the Bush tax cuts. We need to give the American people predictability on what's going to happen. Basically, both sides agree that 98% of the tax cuts for folks under $250,000 a year ought to be extended. We ought to go ahead and do that. We ought to go ahead and set the estate tax and the dividend tax. And again, there are levels on a state it's between $3.5 million to $5 million per person, and double that and put an inflation factor on it. But whatever it is, we ought to go ahead and cut that deal and give you predictability. The debate remains, and again, this is where I fall kind of not between either party, as often the case is, on the top 2%. What do we do with that top 2%? The Democrats say, if we extend the top 2%, that's going to add $700 billion to the deficit. And it will. In the long term, that doesn't make a lot of sense. The Republicans say, rightfully, if you take that 2% off right now during the midst of the recession, that's going to have a hard time with the economy as well. That makes some sense as well. The probable outcome will be that we'll end up doing 98% make them permanent, the top 2% a 2-year extension. I got a problem with that. The problem is, I may be new to Washington, but the one thing I have learned in my 22 months in Washington is, when Congress can punt, they will punt. And my fear is if we simply punt it for 2 years, we'll have this same debate 2 years from now. And while I would love to make sure that nobody's taxes go up, I do think there is a question that says, what is the best utilization of, how can we best maximize some of that leverage? So I'll have an op-ed out later this week that basically says we ought to let that top 2% expire for people like me, but couple it with an equal amount of business tax cuts to try to incent part of that $2 trillion that's sitting in cash to get reinvested in America. There are very few business leaders that I've met that have said that if you can allow my business to make more money at the top line and become more competitive, that they don't mind going back and paying the same rates individual rates they paid under President Clinton or President Bush 41. But we've got to do that in a way that allows American business to compete on this world stage. And that is going to require massive tax reform. But this would be, I believe, a starting point. Regulatory area. Now, I know I'll go ahead and get to the question before the question starts. I share your concerns about what EPA is trying to do on TDMLs. And one of the challenges about the Chesapeake Bay, and one of the things I'm proud of in our term, we actually put our money where our mouth was in terms of cleaning up the Chesapeake Bay. We keep seeing the bay slide. But this kind of effort to try to, through regulatory fiat, do this, and it's one of the reasons why I have not signed on, much to the chagrin of some of my friends in Northern Virginia, to Senator Cardin's bill on the Chesapeake Bay, because there ought to be, again, a way to work through this. Frankly, there should be a way where this can become a revenue source to our farming community. If we can create a nutrient trading program that would generate revenues to our farmers and allow localities then to purchase those nutrient trading credits from your ag community and then get safe harbor so that you don't invest millions of dollars in water treatment plants and then the science changes and you've got to step up again without having any predictability. And I commit to you to work, continue to work on this issue in a way to get it right. And I actually will be laying out a broader piece of legislation that I'm going to be suggesting called regulatory pay-go, which will say not just for EPA, but will say basically for any new federal regulation that's added, you got to take one away. And the concept is simply don't go applauding too much there in the front row there. I know who you are. But the concept is this. One of the things we don't do in government very well, we always have got a new idea. We've always got a new program. We've always got some great new idea. But we do a pretty crummy job, I would argue, at the state level, federal level, and probably even at the local level, of ever going back and looking retrospectively at rules, laws, and regulations that actually are outdated, outmoded, and can be consolidated or eliminated. And if we could put a federal regulatory pay-go process in shape, I think it might also start sending the signal that not all of us are completely wacky in Washington. And I would hopefully, as we lay that out, I could work with you all on trying to get support from local government on that type of concept. Final two points. We live in extraordinary times. Threats of foreign terrorists, folks who want to attack our way of life, an economy that still is I think, moving back positively, but still has enormous challenges in front of us. But one of the great defining issues of our time is going to be the requirement that now, not 20 years from now, we start to get our federal deficit under control. This is an issue, I believe, not only of economic consequence, but candidly of national security. If we allow our balance sheet to continue to erode, and frankly, if interest rates were at traditional levels, we would already be in this kind of pain and hurting. Unless we can get our deficit under control, then we will not have the next generation of Americans having the same opportunities that we've had. And this is going to quite honestly take a little more honest conversation than you normally get out of Washington. Neither political party has all the answers. And anybody that has a sloganeering approach to it, especially a three-word slogan that thinks they can solve the federal deficit, candidly is not telling you the truth. We're not going to be able to solve it on simply one side of the balance sheet. We can get rid of all the earmark spending in the world. It doesn't mean a hill of beans. We are going to have to take on a whole series of questions that, again, you all are courageous and going to have to be part of this. We're going to have to take on entitlement programs.